يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط.
For the purpose of this session today, I'm going to basically try to share some tips on how to begin to even think about academic publication. And within academic publication, my focus will remain on academic journals. And so it's not so much about academic writing and revision. And of course, you cannot publish in a journal, unless you've written. And so there will be some bits about form and writing itself, but it's not focused on writing and revision. It's rather to understand the academic journal publication ecosystem and the process. Why I want to focus on this is because it has been my experience, and I've been largely, kind of surprised how little research scholars understand this process, and because of that, there are, they often get disappointed or frustrated because of lack of understanding, mostly, of how academic publication and publication in journals work. So a lot of what I'm going to share today is based upon my own experience as a scholar of publishing in journals. I have a few publications, and but apart from that, also from my experience of having been part of an editorial team of a very old and established journal called Social Change, which is an interdisciplinary social science journal. So I'm basically drawing upon these two major experiences to talk about this. I'm going to move on to the next slide now. Can you see the slide? Okay. So basically, first thing that I think everybody needs to really understand in order to even start thinking about academic publication per se, and how academic journals work, is to actually think of academic publication as a niche industry. So just as films and filmmaking are an industry, book publication is an industry, therefore academic publication is also a very niche industry. Of course, people who work in it, people who publish in it, people who are concerned with it, the readers, etc. It's a very small subset of readers and a very niche subset of readers. But nevertheless, we as research scholars, I think there's a tendency to take academic publication and normalize its existence and the way it works, and we never really problematize it. So it becomes a fact of life. And I believe that to approach even publication as a research scholar, like you problematize everything that you research, similarly, you understand the entire political economy of academic publication. So obviously, publication is basically ordered around the main entities within this in terms of industry are publishers. Some of these are big publishers. There are university presses, and there are commercial academic presses that do this kind of work. And even the university presses, some of the bigger ones, actually function often as commercial presses. So since we are using the term industry, one thing to, and I won't go into detail into this, but one thing to understand is that there is a process of producing a service or some kind of academic goods here, and that somebody wants to make profit out of it, right? So that's how it works. But on the other hand, because there are various other ethical issues and various other counter forces within the academia, there are other kinds of publishers also. So sometimes, it's various research organizations or civil society organizations, including international civil society organizations that have some other sources of funding from, let's say, a philanthropic activity or public funding from within the university system or other kind of public funding, and then those kind of journals backed by such public publishers will not really be as commercial minded. But there is a certain kind of tension between the two kinds of approaches to academic publishing. Within this, as the next point says, we have to also start thinking of writers and editors who are working in academic journals or publishing, part of the process of publishing, to think of them as knowledge workers. So we are putting in our labor, and some service or some goods are being produced as a result of our labor, right? This is what in a nutshell I mean by also political economy. So let's say, for example, if you're a JRF holder, you're getting a fellowship from some other civil society organization, or you're funding your own studies, then the work that you're doing is being funded by somebody, and it gets published in journals, and journals have subscribers who pay for it, or they may have open access and it becomes a public good. Everybody can read it and access it for themselves. So there's a whole, political economy of academic publication. What cannot be also avoided is a kind of discussion. And so I'm not going again into the details of all this, but just flagging these important issues that often get neglected. There's also the issue of entire power dynamics as to who gets published, who doesn't get published, who gets more space, who doesn't get more space, which are good, reputed journals. If you get published in those journals, then what does it do to your standing within academia? And how difficult or easy is it for first-time authors to get published in these so-called, reputed journals? So those are the issues that, you may or may not have thought about, but these are important considerations within academic publications. And to talk about what are the difficulties in academic publishing, many of you have a first-hand experience of it. You're interested in this because it's not easy to get published, or it's not easy to do all the work that is required to ultimately do academic publication. One of the reasons why it is so difficult is because academic publication is extremely slow and, painstaking, time-consuming process. It can take over a year from your date of submission to, if everything goes right, even then, it can take up to or over a year for your article to actually publish in a journal, right? So this is something that needs to be really kept in mind. And I will keep coming back to this issue of slow publication later. Contrast this with more popular publication or journalistic publications, or publishing academic pieces within news media, which has different considerations, right? So maybe later, if there are any questions, I can deal with that in greater detail. But here, the issue is not so much what is topical, what is that is being discussed in social media or public domain for various reasons, whatever is in news. Academic publication is not about what is newsy at that given point of time. Okay, it's about whether your article or whether your writing is actually adding to the knowledge that exists already on that issue. Of course, there are times when something becomes more in vogue because of that question capturing the imagination of research scholars of that time. But it's not about the turnaround time is quite long. So you academic publications can't hope, never try to keep up with the news cycle. Then opportunities are also extremely limited. Partially they're limited because unlike news publications, the frequency of publication of academic journals is very low. Most good academic journals publish at the most maybe 4 issues of a year in a year. EPW is a very notable exception in India. Economic and Political Weekly, which is a weekly, publishes every week, high quality research articles, etc. So that's one exception. There are several other monthly academic journals in India, but they are comparatively very rare, and then most of them do not enjoy the kind of reputation that EPW enjoys. Most reputed journals will probably publish only twice in a year, thrice in a year, or as I said, at the most 4 times in a year. So if in a journal, in one issue, if they're publishing, let's say, 7 to 8 articles maximum, research articles, then you can imagine in a year, they can't publish more than, let's say, maybe 30, 35 articles, even if they're publishing 4 issues in a year. So, and if these are reputed journals, then you can imagine they're getting way more submissions, and then, their acceptance rate is quite low. So I will come back to this point also again later. The other difficulty arises from the fact that within academia, there is very little effort that goes into, for example, we are doing this kind of session. These kind of things or discussions are not part of any regular training that research scholars go through. Sometimes there'll be some special workshop organized by publishers, etc. And those are often highly competitive. You have to write something in order to, be selected for participating in such workshops. I've seen many commercial academic publishers organize such workshops in collaboration with academic institutions, and the process is, it requires that you will be there's some eligibility requirements, then you have to do some kind of writing, then they shortlist people, so it's very competitive, and often supervisors or faculty members within academic institutions themselves in India do not have such understanding of the publication industry so as to be able to guide their scholars on this. Or sometimes, even if they do, unfortunately, many do not invest that kind of time to mentor their scholars into this sort of thing. So these are difficulties. Now, let me move on to sharing with you the process itself. As I said, it's very slow, it's painful often. What is it that makes it slow? And as a submitting author, you need to understand what is going on once you've made a submission, what goes on in the journal with your submission, what happens to it. Now, because I mentioned the political economy, I have to also mention to you that most of the academic journal editors are unpaid, right? When people are doing these jobs, they're not paid for these jobs, and most do these jobs either because they're very interested in it. They feel that, being an editor, they are getting an opportunity to learn, or there is some kind of reputation and recognition attached to being asked to edit a journal, or being an editor, or being part of an editorial team or an editorial board of a journal. So a lot of people do it because of that. It adds to your CV. You can say, I'm an editor of such and such journal. So these are the reasons why we do it. But because obviously it also requires a lot of time, it requires intellectual labor, and it's unpaid. People mostly have other full-time jobs. They have their own research. They have their own writing. So that's one of the reasons why, it is also slow. But that's not the main reason. What is the main reason? We'll see. So what happens once you submit, and how do you submit? most journals either have open calls, so you can throughout the year you can just go to their submissions page. There's sometimes an email ID, or there'll be an automatic system of submission, some kind of software where you have to register yourself and then submit. And once or sometimes they have these special issues, etc., where they actually approach people who are well known or known, maybe not famous or well known generally, but known to the editors as scholars who are doing research on that issue, on that subject matter. And then they commission articles. They say, will you write for us on around these themes? There will be probably some kind of abstract or concept note, and then this is how various submissions happen. For most full-length articles, either research articles or theoretical articles, there will be and maybe, for all other kinds of forms also. I'll come to the question of form a little later. But for every submission, there will be a desk review. Some editor or more than one editors will read your article, and whatever their standards are, they may have set some kind of standards within themselves. And if it doesn't meet those standards, at the very first go, there will be what is called a desk rejection. So they will say, well, we are not going to even consider it. So at least one reading every piece receives. And the journal editors themselves will reject it, and it will not go for any further processing. This is when you will actually hear very quickly or comparatively quickly from the journal to hear that they will not be publishing your article. If the desk reading gives an impression to the editors that your article has some merit, then it will be further processed. And most academic journals, which have certain kind of acceptability within academia, within this industry, there is this issue of double-blind review in journals. So Scopus or now UGC, etc. There are these databases where they say these are good journals. And I'm not going, one whole session can be done on that issue of which journals make it to these lists and which do not. So I won't go into that. You can, if you're interested, you can read about this. But most such journals, which are part of these, acceptable normatively within the academia, these journals, there will be what is called double-blind peer review. What does it mean when we say double-blind? It means that the reviewers will not know who the author is, and the author will not come to know who the reviewers are. Okay, so there is that double-sided this blindness, and these reviewers are often are actually subject experts. Now, this is one of the stages where a lot of delay happens. Again, most reviewers are not paid for writing review reports. So every year, let's say, for example, I write 6 to 7 review reports, sometimes more. And so I read those articles. I have to first they write to me saying, this is an abstract. Would you like to read it? Would you like to, review it? And once I agree, they send me the article. I have to read it, and they have usually a format in which I have to write my report. And then it's a rigorous process, right? And once I send in as a reviewer, I send in back my review comments to the editors. Then the editors will compile these review reports and share what they think. So there is some kind of editorial discretion involved within it, and they will share these comments with the author. Now, because again, this is an unpaid process, often editors are able to exert pressure or not exert pressure on reviewers to do it quickly based on this power dynamic. If the editors are fairly, senior, coming with very hefty reputations, reviewers are comparatively junior, they can be pushed to do this quickly. It is also sometimes, that how many can I do in a year? So there are a lot of dynamics within that. Again, one whole session can be done on this entire process of peer review. So then these peer review comments are shared back with the author, and authors are asked to sometimes revise the articles. Either some minor revisions are required, sometimes major revisions are required, sometimes editors will say, well, they can decide that the revisions that the reviewers have asked are so substantial that maybe they will think that the author should resubmit, right? So they will share the comments and they'll say, well, at this point, we are not going to make a commitment to publish your piece, but if you can make these revisions, then you are free to or welcome to resubmit your article. So then the entire process will start once again. Or sometimes when they feel that, the scope of revision is there and they feel confident in your ability to do those revisions, then you might not be asked to resubmit, but to just send the revised version of your article, right? At this point, it is also quite possible for the reviewers to say this should not be published. There's nothing new in it, or it doesn't add to the knowledge, or there is some or the other problem in it. They can either give detailed comments, or it can be again a summary rejection. Once your article has been revised and resubmitted, or revised and submitted back to the editors, and editors are satisfied with it, sometimes they even ask reviewers to review it once again and see whether reviewers are satisfied with it. So again, delay. And once everybody is satisfied, then it goes into the last stage, that is the production stage, where now no major revisions will be done, but copy editors will look at it. Copy editors will edit if there are minor mistakes, some grammatical problems, they will do those corrections. But if there are issues that need, again, author's attention, for example, you've made a claim, but there is no citation, there's no source, they're like, where is this coming from? They'll ask you those kind of questions. So copy editors' questions and queries and comments will again come back to the author. Author will have to respond back to them. Final thing would be made. Some designers would design the PDF or whatever form in which it will be published. Editors and proofreaders will proofread it, and then eventually it will be published. There'll be some more logistical questions about copyright, this, that, and the other. But this process also can take several months. Many journals want, publishers want editorial process to be completed and all the articles in their final shape be given to the publishers at least 4 months in advance. So once everything is done, it can still take 4 to 6 months for your article to be actually published in the journal, right? So this is the entire process. And as you can see, that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and most often scholars have no idea that this is happening. So they submit and they don't hear from the editor for a month, and then they get very angry. As I was a caretaker journal editor for a few months, and I can tell you that it was the most stressful period of my entire working life, because of the angry emails that I used to get from all the professors and research scholars. Some would even try to get my phone number and call me and scold me. So this is something that is not very well understood, So that's why I thought it was important to spend some time to share the process and how elaborate, it is. So going further, now this is the entire process. This is the way the whole thing works. Now, focus back on the author. You want to publish. How do you even begin to think of publishing? So, some of you may have already some experience. You might have published one article from your MPhil dissertation or your master's dissertation and so on. So you have some idea, but I'm going to speak to basically, those people in the audience today who have not even done any publication, and they have no idea how to begin this process. So what you need to do is basically think about timing. When do you need for your article to be published? If it is a requirement or a partial requirement of conferment of a degree, then let's say you're an MPhil student and you want to have your article published in a journal or at least accepted in a journal by the time you're submitting your dissertation, then you need to actually start working on one article that you need to publish at the very beginning of your fieldwork, because MPhil mostly, is just 1 year of fieldwork and writing, everything involved. So I would advise that, in the first year when you're doing your coursework, now, of course, the new education policy mandates that there will be no MPhil. So even for the PhD scholars, you should start thinking about your article or some kind of publication from the time when you're doing your coursework within the very first year. At the very least, second year when your proposal and everything is finalized, just begin the process. So because it will take time. So if you are now, let's say in 3 months, you're going to submit your PhD and you're like, now, how do I publish? You start sending your article to journals and then you start sending them angry emails. It will not help. So, so it needs to be done in time and planned well in advance. The second thing, and since this is a women's group and especially Muslim women's study circle, I think there's a lot to be said about this whole issue of imposter syndrome, where we think, we are underconfident our work. And I've seen even senior professors, very famous scholars, actually being women scholars, being underconfident about their work and thinking whether it should be published or not published, or, it's not good enough and it's not perfect enough. And they spend a lot of time perfecting it and thinking that it's not yet ready for publishing. Now, I can't, go into the details of this imposter syndrome right now. So I, really encourage you to research a little bit about this imposter syndrome. But basically, you need to do some kind of psychological self-help to get over this idea and to see how do you actually think about when is your work ready for publication, right? And obviously, no article is perfect ever. So the most brilliant articles, if you speak to their authors, they'll probably tell you 10 things that they could have done, or with hindsight, they would have done if they were to rewrite it, but they didn't do it for various reasons at that point of time. Sometimes there isn't enough time, sometimes they couldn't do that kind of field work, etc., etc. Right? So there is no such thing as a perfect article. How do you think about publishing is also to actively seek opportunities. As I said, there will be open calls in various journals. If there are sometimes, conferences organized by academic organizations. Of course, there are departments within academic institutions or think tanks that also have journals. So if they organize a conference, there is a better chance that you will get to publish in their journal. And often in conferences, there will be editors, etc., who will be in the conferences. If they hear your article or your presentation of a research paper that you've written, they might get impressed, they might be interested. And once you write to them, there'll be better reception of your proposal. So you have to actually put yourself out there and actively seek opportunities for publication, because I'm focused on journals today. I'm not talking so much about edited volumes and books, etc. So that is a topic for some other session. So these are important considerations. Now you've written something that you've gotten enough confidence. You think, okay, now I think I can publish it. Something interesting there, something of value there that other scholars might want to read. Then how do you make your manuscript ready for publication? So one of the things is the consideration of form. What is it that you should think of publishing? And for beginners, I would say one of the first things that most research scholars publish or should publish are book reviews. So you're doing a PhD in a particular topic, or even MPhil dissertation or a master's dissertation, some kind of research writing, then you are kind of an expert on that issue. And your comment on a book or your critique of a book as a reviewer is of value, right? And book reviews are also, kind of easier to publish because book reviews don't go through the peer review, the blind, double-blind peer review process, etc. So I really encourage all of you to try your hand at submitting to an academic journal with book review. But you have to be careful. Most journals do not accept unsolicited book reviews, right? So you can't just write a book review and send to a journal. They will not even consider it. Even nobody will read it. I can tell you that. So what happens is that if you are interested in writing a review of a book, or you have written a review of a book, instead of sending the entire review, you should write to the book review editor and say, here's my CV, or here's why I am an expert on this issue, and this is the book that I'm interested in reviewing. Would it interest you if I wrote a review of this book? And they can say yes or no, and depending on that, then you go forward, right? So pitch it, make a pitch, and then send a book review. Then a review of literature again. But a review of literature needs to have some kind of argument within it. So it should be an essay that says something, makes an argument. It's not just a long, annotated bibliography. So again, one of those things that I don't have time in this session to do, but I encourage you to look into the difference between an annotated bibliography and a review of literature essay, right? So, but a review of literature essay, which gives a sort of, a lowdown on research so far on an important area of research or an area of interest to academic community, makes an interesting argument, presents an interesting critique, is also something that is easier to publish. So research scholars should definitely try their hand at writing some review of literature essays. Then there are various, of course, a research article or a theoretical article, which is making some kind of theoretical argument. It's not based on empirical research, etc. That's always, the more traditional or a more common form. You can write comment in journal articles, but mostly comments are commissioned. Journal editors will ask somebody to write a comment, and usually it's rare that they will consider somebody just submitting a comment, right? Like that. You can write research notes, which is to basically say what are the fresh questions or fresh approaches that should be used to research a particular field of study, where some, tired and old format or old questions have been repeatedly asked for a long time. So if you want to give a fresh perspective on something, research notes are something that are not given so much attention by scholars, but I think they are best placed to do this kind of writing. Then there are various other less common forms of writing. For example, some journals publish interviews of noted scholars. So you can actually approach a scholar that you really like, whose work has been influential for you, and ask them if they would let you interview them, and then ask them interesting questions, record it, transcribe it, or you can do written interviews with them, send them a list of questions over email, they respond back. Those are the, and then of course there are various other forms of writing. Depending on what journal it is, you can look into that. Apart from that, one of the things that you should do is to very actively have other people read your article and ask for feedback. So it can be your friends, or it can even be your teachers. Write to them, those that you think will be kind enough to read your article and give honest feedback, which will help you actually. So do this. But sometimes, it is not unreasonable for scholars to also be worried about the fact that you give your work to somebody and there is always a fear of them picking up your ideas and using them unacknowledged in their research, etc. So there's a question of trust. And of course, you have to take a call on who to ask, who not to ask, and so on. But it's something that's really helpful in developing yourself as an author, and also improving that piece of writing that you've done. The other advice that is, I'm surprised why it's not given to research scholars mostly, is to be generous in citations. Give as many citations as possible. Everything that you've read, everything that is, kind of important for you or relevant for you. Don't fear long bibliography, but be generous in citation, and especially be generous in citations for women scholars, for scholars from other marginalized communities, and younger scholars, right? Because often what happens is, and this has been even my experience, is that some, because, scholars try to think of their bibliographies or their list of references as something which would impress the readers and editors. So they want to just have, like really heavy name, Foucault, Marx, this, etc. But they don't want to write names of people or cite articles by early career writers or academics or younger faculty members. In the whole dynamics of citations and referencing, how there is also marginalization of scholars who are in the lower rungs of the academic hierarchy, in terms of age, in terms of seniority, in terms of what kind of universities, etc., that they are affiliated with, and how much they have already published, etc. So be generous. It costs nothing, citing more scholars costs nothing. And then, of course, the more traditional advice, that don't think that you've written a masterpiece. Sometimes, the other extreme of imposter syndrome is that you write one draft and then you feel very happy with it, and then you feel ki bas ho gaya. No article should be submitted to any journal like this. You should harshly edit your own writing and read a little bit about what are editorial skills, become your own editor, and revise your article several times, and then repeat, as in give it to other people to read, get their comments, revise, edit again and again. So, there should be several rounds of this for your writing. How to decide upon a journal. So now you've done all this. Where do you send your article? Where do you submit your article? So there are several ways, several considerations, and which will help you, determine or zero in upon which journals to write to. So you should, of course, ask your friends who are working in the same area if they're published, where did they publish, what was their experience, even if they got rejections from other journals, what was their experience, and ask your supervisor if they're helpful. Then remember I said be generous in citations. Now, once you've been generous in citations, look at your own bibliography, look at your own field of a list of references, and see where are the articles that you like that are connected to your topic are being published. So if many of the articles that you have referenced are have been published in one or two journals mostly, then those are the journals that you should target, right? Because either those journals are more specialized into your area of research, or they have a special interest and they have published several pieces in it. And this is also one of the things in which it helps if you've been generous. So you submit to a journal, and in your list of references, there is nothing that has already been published in their journal, then it's not such a good thing. So you should, if you're considering submitting to a journal, do carefully read not only the journal description as to what kind of topics interest them, what kind of fields do they publish into, etc., but you should also browse several of their recent issues and see if they've published something that's related to you. Read those articles, reference them if relevant in your articles, cite these sources. You should look at the advisory boards of the journals. Look at who are the people, who are the scholars who are serving on the advisory board or editorial board of these journals. And if these are scholars who work in your field, then that there will be interest in that journal in your subject area, right? So you have to see that. And then, of course, there are several other considerations. What is the periodicity? So if you submit to EPW, I know that EPW has a very formidable reputation. And often when I tell scholars, why don't you send your article to EPW? And they're like, EPW, they're like, really, what are you saying, ma'am? It's like too big. But the thing is that EPW is a weekly, so they are always they have so much space to publish, right? Just do the maths. How many articles do they need? But then because they are also very popular and very extensively read in academia, therefore their rate of submissions and rate of rejections will also be high, right? So think about these issues of periodicity, reputation, and what is your expectation. So, for example, if I've written an article that I think that should not be behind a paywall, and I think it's an article that can really influence research in that area, I would want it to be in some kind of open access journal where everybody can read it without having to subscribe or having to pay for that article or have access through institutional this thing. So it's not just limited access. So those kind of expectations also should come into deciding which journal to publish. After submission, what do? Be patient, wait. So don't, just become nervous and start writing within 2-3 weeks. At least a month, if you haven't heard from them, at least what mostly happens now that, most journals are using software is that once you publish, you get, some kind of automatic acknowledgement of your submission. Earlier, what used to happen, and even now there are some old-fashioned journals where you submit by email and some human being at some point of time will read those emails and then write an email to acknowledge your submission. That kind of place would take several weeks to even acknowledge your submission, right? So you have to be patient, even if it's an automatic thing. At some point or the other, there will be delays. And, even if there are no delays, everything goes according to schedule, it takes time. Second thing I would say is be ready for rejection. Because as I said, most good journals will get very high number of submissions, and whether they like it or they hate it, they will have to reject a lot of articles. How do you read this rejection? It's one journal rejecting your article doesn't mean that your article is bad, that it is not worth publication. It only means that given whatever contingencies within that journal, it could be either that they are not interested in that thing. It could even be that they have published something similar very recently, so they don't want to repeat, an article on that same issue. Or there can be many other factors that contribute to what is called a desk rejection. So that's one. You have to be mentally ready for that and don't take it personally as a comment on your ability as a scholar. It's easier said than done. It will hurt when it comes, the rejection, but give it some time and try to talk to yourself rationally that it's not, let me not take it personally. It will sting for a little bit of time, then it'll be okay. Reviewers' comments, now sometimes reviewers' comments are very harsh and negative. Some reviewers are not going to be sensitive. It also depends on what I'm going through at that point of time. Sometimes I might have written slightly snarky sentences to authors, and maybe I wasn't even aware of it. And sometimes, I have been deliberately harsh because it was just efficient to be honest about it, and honesty does read like harsh words sometimes. So how do you deal with a reviewer's criticism? One is that first you read it, it's harsh, it is going to really hurt. Leave it for some time and then come back to it maybe after a few hours, after a day, even a couple of days. Reread it. There's no hurry, okay? Because everybody knows it's slow, it takes time. So you read it again and try to read it, filtering out the emotional stuff and see whether they really are making some points which will be of value to you if you were to revise it. So a lot of research scholars, I have heard even my peers or my juniors, sometimes even my seniors say that, editors of that so-and-so journal are so arrogant. They wrote to me like this. And then, I gave it back to them. मैंने बहुत aggressive email लिखा उनको ये वो. So you can always do that. It's easy to do that, right? And sometimes I can tell you that reviewers and editors will be harsh also given the power dynamics. So it will be about their own positionality. It might be about your identity. Even so, my advice is to filter out all this stuff, notice it and say, well, he or she, they're being mean. There was no need to say this sort of stuff, but they still have said it. Ignore it and come to the more substantive part. If you've been asked to revise something and you feel that it will make it better, then do those revisions. But if there are some revisions that you think are unreasonable to ask or even wrong, you do not want to do those revisions, then you can always write back to the editors saying that this revision I will make, this revision is unreasonable for such and such reasons, 1, 2, 3. I do not think that it will make my article better if I make these revisions. Write all of this very civilly, right? So sometimes, and sometimes editors can be also very sympathetic about it, and they will accept this, right? I can tell you from my experience, once I have submitted to a journal in UK, and the editorial process was all fine. But the copy editor heavily edited my article for English, and it just changed sentences drastically, sometimes even changing the meaning. And there was a hint of, irritation at Indian writing or some kind of racism involved there, right? So I was really upset at it, and I wanted to write an angry email. But eventually, I didn't do it immediately. And then I wrote a very calm email to the editor saying, well, some of these edits are actually making my sentences better, but sentence this, and I put it in quotes, then sentence this, these are the examples, few examples where the copy editor has actually unnecessarily meddled with my sentences, changing the meaning. And I'm wondering whether it is because I'm from India, and not a native speaker of English. So then the editor looked into this issue, and he wrote back to me saying that I agree with what you're saying, and please accept whatever changes that you want to accept, but do not accept all the other changes that you think are unreasonable. So the point that I'm trying to make is that you can negotiate this, but negotiate it civilly. Don't write angry emails back at editors. It doesn't help the entire process. So again, be patient through the production process also. That also takes a lot of time. So I will stop here. Thank you so much.